transit system. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel.
So there's like a genre in video games of games that people want, franchises that people want to continue.
Shenmue.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Let me finish a sentence first before you start talking.
It's Shenmue.
So classic example. Wouldn't it be strange if Sega was just like, hey, random development company, go take Shenmue 1 and 2 and do whatever you want to with it. That's great. It seems so rare. That like never ever happens. And yet here we are talking about Black Mesa, this like remake, I guess you would call it, a reskin of Half-Life 1.
What is the right word for it? I think they use a particular word on the page, but
Reimagining.
I think
Fancy way of saying
rebuilt,
it.
whatever you want to call it.
But same audio files, same level.
Some.
Okay.
They've gotten more extensive the more they've gone along. The Black Mesa started as just a Half-Life 2 mod, and that's it. They were just kind of remaking it and trying to repolish 1 to look like 2 with using the same engine. And I think that was just a small group of people, and it's been so long since we first heard about this that it's kind of surprising in some ways to hear that it's kind of launching. And the reason we're talking about this is because it's launched as an early access game on Steam now. So this is a game you can buy as opposed to just being a mod. And that's what's most interesting about this journey that Black Mesa's been on for a while now.
I mean, it's surprising that we are talking about it, considering the Half-Life series is still fairly prevalent in the games industry. I mean, we got Half-Life 3, Half-Life 4 was really great. There are all those offshoots, of Half-Life, of the franchise. It's a really healthy franchise in video games, so it's surprising that people would, devote so much time to recreating this classic game. You both played it, you mentioned, a long time ago.
Yeah.
When it was, an alpha and beta? What was what shape was it in when you guys checked it out?
So they still don't have the Zen levels. That's the biggest thing. Which is surprising that they chose to launch it early access now, still without those levels. I thought when they were going to do this full, like a release on Steam, $20, I thought it would be fully complete. But it still seems like they're still working on that.
Well, I mean, that's sort of the nature of early access, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it has that branding on it. But I played it when it was a mod. Initially, and it's very impressive. But at the same time, I guess we're going to open this can of worms now. It's a very impressive thing that I have no interest in a way. Like, I consider Half-Life like a truly monumental game, a game that changed its medium, PC gaming, once it came out. Like, it's a landmark title. That sounds very hyperbolic, but I really believe it. And because of that, I think there are a few games that I feel that way about, that you have to be very careful when you're making them. Otherwise, when I'm playing it, it's just not the same thing, Like, it's clear that the people who are making this are talented and they have a reverence for it, but it's sometimes things can't be remade because their original form was that important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess that raises a good question. That if you stumble across someone that is unfamiliar with the Half-Life series,
right,
would you recommend that they play this game before Half-Life 2? Or you're like, no, you should play the original game because then you can see the jump that we made, going into Half-Life 2. I remember the first time we saw G-Man, they showed the old G-Man first before they showed the new one to really jam it home like how awesome that engine was, how awesome, that amazing brand new engine was. I think it holds up. A lot of people would disagree, but what would you say, Ben? Would you tell them no, play the original Half-Life so you can appreciate it for what it is?
That's a really good question, but I'm somebody who is very puzzled. Like, I read a lot on message boards, and a lot of my friends tell me that they can't go back to PS1 games because that early era of 3D graphics is so rough. And while I totally understand that point, it's not something that I agree with, because I think I approach things with the sense that this is of a time. It was important in that time. It mattered in this time for these reasons. And anytime I go into a game with that mindset, the way it looks doesn't bother me. The way it sounds doesn't bother me. The way it plays doesn't bother me, because I'm more interested in it from a historical perspective. And I think that's what Half-Life is. Games are weird because they're so tied to technology, but I don't always think the answer is let's fix all of the rough edges, because it's no, then you can't understand why it was so good originally.
I remember having to pull my roommate's teeth Deus Ex to get him to play it because he started playing it, and the graphics, the game has aged so much. So, you're obviously a purist. You love the original art form. Maybe that's a negative.
No, I get where you're coming from.
At heart,
Yeah.
at least.
It's
But I know there are so many people out there, like you were just saying, that have a hard time going back. It's like, I always have the saying, like, oh, you missed the boat, or like the boat has sailed. If you didn't grow up at the time of Half-Life and you are growing up in the HD era, or you're just now getting into games on PlayStation 4, it's the first console you've ever owned, looking back at Half-Life would be very jarring. Like, first-person shooters have come a far and long way. But
it's just weird because I think games, it's an unfair double standard in a way, and this is not a good one-to-one comparison, but when we go back and we watch old movies, like you go back and you watch old black and white movies, there are some things that are pretty rough. The style of acting is very different. It's a lot more theatrical in a lot of ways. The editing is not nearly as sharp.
Pace is a lot slower.
Exactly. All of those things are essential to that period of film, and it's very important. We have to preserve that, I don't look at it and I'm like, oh, well, they should remake this with Hugh Jackman and HD. Like, no, because that's not the point. And I feel like with games, it's always like, oh, I have fond memories of this, but I don't want any of the rough edges, so let's remake it. And I think if we get into that cycle, we get to a point where we don't appreciate the original form anymore. It's like, I'm not against remakes, but I just think you have to come at it with the right perspective.
I mean, do you at least appreciate, the return to relevance? That like a lot of people that never, played a game. You're a big fan.
Half-Life.
To like, I know we're talking about shooters right now, but to like shift over into another genre, if there was like a classic JRPG that you loved, that was getting a new skin or was getting, slightly upgrade for like a portable system or was suddenly available on Steam, but like did have a fresh coat of paint on it, would you at least appreciate the fact that like a lot of new people are going to talk about this game, are going to appreciate this game? I do invite you to go back and see it in its original form, but
are they? Or do you think a lot of new people are going to play this, or do you think it's just a lot of people that played Half-Life? I'm not saying that accusatory.
A lot more new people are going to play the new version than they're going to try to go back and play the old version because they've had an amount of time, large or small, to already do that. And for most remakes, especially on consoles, specifically on consoles, there's not a good way to go back and do that. You can't buy a regular Nintendo right now, right? You can't buy a PS2. Oh, well, you might be able to still find one, but for a PC game, it's a little bit different because you could still try to find a way to make the original Half-Life work if it's not compatible with your operating system or whatever the case may be. But most PC games, especially within the last 20 years, will still work in one form or another. So that point is kind of moot with this game in particular.
Well, they have also Half-Life Source, which is like my ideal HD upgrade remake because it is the exact same game, just with Source Engine 2. Has not been tampered with. Original vision, original vibe, and aesthetic. So,
how do you get this? How do I get that?
That's on Steam.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is on Steam as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
sorry, Huber just touched on like a really good point that I think I've been trying to say, and he said it a little bit better. When we talk about other mediums, like when we talk about movies, we talk about visions. We talk about a director's vision, and I think, for a lot of different reasons that we won't go into, authorship in games is something that isn't thought about a lot. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is, I'm not against remakes, but I do want to respect the original vision and the original intent. And I think it's become a trend where that isn't even a concern.
Yeah. Do you, there might not be specific examples of this, but let's make a hypothetical. If you come into a remake expecting to see that respect, you expect to see, or would you be pleased with that result if you come into a remake and you say, wow, they actually did a fantastic job respecting the original while still making something that feels fresh?
The point I always bring up is Resident Evil. Resident Evil Remake was remade by the original author,
by the original creator,
Shinji Mikami. He remade his own game, his vision, director of both. That's why when people say they want a Resident Evil 2 remake, I'm a lot more hesitant because Kamiya, I doubt, would have anything to do with it, the director of Resident Evil 2.
Sure.
So the vibe and the feel and the vision and the craftsmanship would just not, it wouldn't be the same.
And I totally agree, but with Matt's point, I think it's a case-by-case basis because look at the new King's Quest game. Now, I haven't played through the whole thing, but I've seen a lot of it.
Yep.
That game is sort of a re-envisioning of King's Quest. For all intents and purposes, it's bringing King's Quest into a modern era, and I feel like it understands King Quest so completely that it is the right step forward with it. Okay. Now look at Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, which is a game I don't like.
I'm with you on that one.
I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me, but the problem with Twin Snakes is it alters the tone of the original game in a really bizarre way.
Yep.
It inserts things that don't belong there into the game, and it almost feels like sacrilege in a weird way. Maybe it's too strong of a word.
Do you think one way to possibly fix the problem, or at least alleviate it to some sense, is to have the original game present in this remake, similar to how the Halo 2 and Master Chief Collection, how you can click back and forth between the two games, and maybe it's maybe a task to set the game up in a way where you can just jump back and forth at will between the two versions, but maybe have it in there somewhere. In the options, maybe you unlock it by beating the game, and then you can go back and play the original. So at least they're acknowledging that the original exists. Which brings me to my final question. I'm surprised that it's called Black Mesa.
Right.
Because I wonder do you think it's even possible that somebody could find this game online, play it, and have no idea what Half-Life is? Have no idea.
One human being, yes.
Then not naturally go into finding Half-Life 2 and then play that.
Unless you stumble across it having already been installed on your system and you don't read the description, then sure. But
it's gotta happen.
It is just, it's not even remotely possible. And the thing is to kind of come full circle on this, we've kind of gone through our concerns, but we haven't really addressed what Black Mesa really is, and that it is Half-Life 1. Mm-hmm. Some of the rooms might be different. You might have an extra virtual foot here and there, and like walls are made a little bit differently, but the look, the feel, and everything is still the same. Playing through it, it's basically like playing Half-Life 1 with Half-Life 2 mechanics. And look and feel. And the thing is that the first thing I noticed was that it feels more alive than Half-Life 1 did. There's a lot more people walking around. There's a little bit more uniqueness between some of the different NPCs. The voice acting still very much the same, even though it's been redone. A lot of the visuals redone. Facial animations alone, to me, at first glance at the very least, looked far better than Half-Life 2. To me, in some ways, they've actually made steps beyond Half-Life 2 in Half-Life 1. And so there's a lot of impressive things, and I'm not even done with it. I'm going to keep playing it because it's Half-Life.
Touching on that, it's Half-Life. Half-Life 1, no one's ever going to take that away from me. That's always going to be there.
Right.
I've lived it so many times. But when stuff like this comes out, Black Mesa or Deus Ex Revision mod, I've played through the original Deus Ex so many times. No one's ever going to take that away from me. It is fun when you love a game so much to hop into an experience like this that changes it up and shows respect for the original. And then, get through it. Maybe in a couple more years, I'll replay the original.
Yeah, I feel like I've cast an overly negative tone because I do like Black Mesa.
Yeah,
I think it's a cool idea. It's just it's a weird time because these people obviously care about Half-Life, and Half-Life is worth caring about, and they're doing something amazing with it. And man, I just wish Valve cared about it. You know?
But that's another Just Played.
That is another Just Played entirely.
I mean, honestly, you just can't talk about
that's
it.
That's a Just
without
Develop.
bringing it
That's a
up.
totally different show.
But that does bring up a really good point, and we don't have to go into this because we could for years. But
Let's have a part 2 right after this.
Okay.
this kind of plays into the laziness that everybody kind of criticizes Valve for. It's like, this is something that they probably could have easily done, sure, whatever. I'm sure that they'd turn their nose up at it and be like, whatever, screw you. Like, our game's out there and we've done our work and whatnot. But they kind of have this track record of letting other people do the work for them and then just kind of jumping on the bandwagon.
Turtle
so
Rock.
you can't turn away from the fact that this Black Mesa, which a ton of work has gone into for quite some time now, started as a passion project, now is being sold for $19.99 as early access. You can't turn away from that fact that it's smart on Valve's part to just let other people do that work and to be like, okay, well, yeah, you guys have done good work. You've honored our project. Therefore, we will share the revenue with you.
It's more Half-Life than we've gotten in years.
So
that is
happy
true.
about that.
And Half-Life is a good thing. It's something that should be cherished.
It is, yeah.
It is. And
But-
who knows? I mean,
but
the
I
momentum
just-
of this.
I'm sick and tired of talking about Valve. Like you said, like, man, it's a very smart business practice.
Yeah.
That's
They're a
not what
business.
Valve is to me,
They're not a
man.
game company anymore.
You know,
They're a
like
business.
Valve made games that affected me, really
Personally.
affected me personally, and I just,
Dark times.
in a weird way, Black Mesa reminds me of how much that's not true anymore.
So, are we saying right now, like, Valve, just pass the goddamn torch?
Yeah. Have
you've
these
got
guys
people-
make Half-Life 3.
They're very talented. They obviously care more than you do.
Yeah.
Dota 2 just
pass
played,
the
coming next week.
torch.
That's not even a joke, but it kind of is.
So thumbs up. So we should check it out. Even in
Yes.
early access, it's another good early access game.
It
Early
is-
access
it
is
is
usually
early
lots
access.
of bugs and weird things.
You've got guys that have been on this train for years now,
Yeah.
and they've just now started to find a way to make money off of it. They obviously care. They are extremely talented, and you're not going to waste your money by buying it. Pick it up and enjoy yourself, and who knows, maybe you're funding a movement.
What's
Maybe,
cool-
maybe it gains momentum.
I don't usually like early access because you're not getting the full game, but there is a cool natural endpoint. You know, it's before the Zen levels.
Sure.
It almost feels like part 1. Black
Yep.
Mesa part 1. And then part 2 will be out later.
They deserve the attention.
They do.
For sure.
Sold. Thank you for the heated discussion, gentlemen. I'll check it out.
Gordon, good morning. I'm glad you're here. These last-minute changes, they're a bit strange to just... Oh! It's about to go critical.